Hello Internet, my name is Ryan Ingram and this is a video that I've wanted to record for a few weeks now, and with everything going on in the world, it is crazy times to say the least, but ultimately I think we live in the best of all possible times to be alive, in the best of all possible countries to live in. And in order for me to kind of back up that statement, I should really tell you a little bit about myself. And for those of you on the channel, you're already familiar with me. I was in law enforcement 3 years ago, and I have changed my life drastically since then. Now, I was born in '90, and at the time, there weren't many interracial relationships. My mom is white, my dad is black. My dad is one of six, one of two to have never done any jail or prison time. He didn't have a father present in his life, and he has managed to become the greatest father that a kid could ever ask for. My mom, also from a broken home. She was disowned by her father for 9 years after she married my dad. And, they stopped the cycle. They raised my brother and I under the impression that they were not, under any circumstances, going to get divorced. They wanted the best for us. They taught us the importance of your immediate family. And at the end of the day, they taught us that my brother and I, we were all that we had in life. We stuck together. Now, I grew up in North Carolina, and like I mentioned, not many interracial relationships. I have heard tons of different slurs, and yes, I have experienced racism, and probably a lot of it. But here's the cool thing that I really want to focus on. All of the times that I've experienced racism in my life, it hasn't been from anybody that has had any bearing on my life. They've been from people that don't matter. They've been to people that work entry-level jobs. They've been from peers that, for a multitude of other reasons, people didn't really like them either. They're jerks. And at the end of the day, racists are jerks. That's it. No more, no less. Just big, giant jerks. And I think everybody agrees on that. Now, here's the cool thing. What changed my life 3 years ago when I was in law enforcement? Naturally, I saw a lot of things in law enforcement that I shouldn't have. I've seen some dead babies. I have seen teenagers lose their lives in car accidents. I have seen people shot to death. I have been at the hospital with an officer that was shot in the face. None of these things were particularly fun. I remember sitting in church with my wife one day, and I just had this Rolodex, just image after image of dead body go off in my head. And I realized, you know what? This is not healthy. I even had a local newspaper write an article about me as to why I am myself racist, which was very confusing for me and my identity as a human, by the way. But nonetheless, I was sitting in church one day with my wife, and I just had this Rolodex of all of the dead bodies that I've ever seen kind of just go off in my head. And I just felt trapped by negativity. And at that moment, I kind of stepped back and realized, you know what? Mentally, I am not in a very healthy spot. So I decided to take advantage of one of the programs that the department I was working at offered. It's called EAP. I don't know what it stands for, but it pretty much means that you can go see a therapist or some sort of counselor a certain number of times for free. And that's exactly what I did. And in one of the sessions, the therapist realized that I loved reading and learning. So he started providing me with a list of books that I needed to read to kind of help me think through all of the things it is that I was wrestling with. And one of the books, it's called The Body Keeps the Score. And I gotta admit, I didn't read the entire book because I got to one particular part of the book that completely resonated with me, was incredibly impactful, and just changed the entire way I thought about life. Now, this book is about trauma and the way that your body and your brain react to it. I'm sure I'm gonna butcher this, but there was an experiment done with two dogs trying to figure out how they reacted to trauma. And what they did was they took each dog and they put them in a cage. And the cage was just barely big enough for the dog. When I was reading this, imagined, just the fur sticking out through the grates, right? A very uncomfortable position to be in. So they fed the dogs, of course, they gave them water, but overall they had them locked in this cage. Now, every day they opened up the gates on these cages. And one dog, they let it just go out and run freely. The dog enjoyed itself, it, had tons of fun running around. And the other dog, each time it tried to get out of the cage, they shocked it. It would try again, they shocked it. The next day would come along, they would do the same thing. One gate opens, the dog runs freely. Another gate opens, they shock the dog. Well, at some point, they stop shocking the dog. And guess what happens? When the gates open, one dog runs out freely, the other dog sits. Being shocked is no longer a threat, but nonetheless, that dog is in the cage. He's not attempting to get out. He doesn't want to attempt to get out. And it clicked. Now, this was an experiment. I'm sure you could debunk it. I'm sure there's thousands of different things that you could find wrong with it, but I internalized it. I resonated with it. I took just an inventory of where I was mentally, what I was doing with my life, and just overall how I felt. And I realized I'm the dog in the cage. But it was even worse because I put myself there. When I started speaking with several of the other officers that I work with, I realized that the majority of them were these angry, frustrated dogs. The commisery was extraordinarily thick. We all were complaining about the same things. And that's not true in just law enforcement. That's true everywhere. Every time there's a gathering of people and some sort of point of contention to be negative about, most likely human nature is going to kick in. We're all going to relate and be empathetic and miserable together, which in some ways is good. But at the end of the day, I had to ask myself, why am I remaining in this cage? Why am I staying miserable and living this life when nobody's making me? Now, I transferred to a smaller police department, and because the grass is greener, right? The subculture would be different there. And that's true. It was different. Everything was a lot slower paced. My stress level went down tremendously. But then my wife and I had our first kid. And if you know me, then you know that when my wife and I had our first kid, it was incredibly important for the both of us that she be a stay-at-home mom. So with this new sense of freedom that I just got from therapy and reading this book and making a commitment to myself that I am never going to be that dog that stays in the cage over things that aren't real anymore, and realizing that I wasn't providing the kind of lifestyle for my family that we wanted, I committed to reading one book per day until I was able to make that change and make the kind of lifestyle that my family wanted a reality. And 3 years later, with a ton of help from mentors, other people, a lot of trial and error, a lot of failures, a lot of getting back up again, switching things around, and trying it again. We've got over 63 rental properties. I'm going to close on another one here in like an hour and a half. And, our net worth is now over $1 million. I do make more than 6 figures in a single year. Things that 3 years ago, when I was a cop, when I was that dog in the cage, I would never believe you that this was my reality. But 3 years of discipline, of hard work, of being intentional and focused, I was able to drastically change my life. And the only way that I was able to do that is because we are alive today in the greatest of all possible times to be alive. I started reading books, I searched the internet, I watched YouTube videos, I learned from people that I have never had a conversation with. I consider Warren Buffett, who I've never had a personal conversation with, one of my greatest mentors. Jim Rohn. He's been dead for a while now, but he also is one of my greatest mentors. I have access to so much information, and I was able to find all of the answers that I needed to dramatically change my life. And the good news is all this knowledge is compounding. I'm going to continue to learn, and I'm going to continue to get better. And thank God for capitalism, which, this country has allowed me to just create my own business. I was able to just log in online and create an LLC. I was able to create my own operating agreement from eforms.com. Nobody asked me where I came from. Nobody asked me what race I am. I didn't need to seek anyone's approval. I reached a point in which I was completely miserable and determined that I was never going to live under these circumstances again. That was my trigger point. That caused me to go out and try absolutely everything that I could in order to change my life. I didn't have to answer to anyone. I didn't have to seek anyone's permission. My wife and I started our first business after hours in our own kitchen. It's America, it's capitalism. And since then, we have been focusing almost all of our energy on how do we provide the most amount of value so that we could improve everyone's lives around us. And I know Adding value is just this buzzword that really gets lost in context and makes people go, ugh, when they hear it. But it's true. Capitalism rewards value. If you can improve anyone's life, they don't care who you are. They don't care where you came from. All they want is for their lives to be easier. Amazon has exploded because of Amazon Prime. You can get anything with the click of a button. One-click shopping, 2 days. Think about that, all you 90s, 80s, 70s babies. Like, that's unheard of. That's unreal. You know, all this to say, my dad, broken home and dirt poor, he has told me stories about eating paper and eating sandwiches that was just bread and sugar. My mom, broken home, disowned by her parents. Nobody was privileged. When I started my businesses, nobody asked me for my privilege level. So all of this to say two things. Let's take a hard look inside ourselves. In what ways are we remaining that dog inside the cage? What factors in our lives do we have control over? What variables are no longer real that we can now overcome? And the second thing, in what way can you make the world a better place to live? What unique skills, what unique personality do you have that allows you to deliver value to the world that benefits everybody? Because that is what capitalism responds to. So a few quotes that I think about and reflect on often, just to kind of keep myself in check, is the first one is by Emerson. He says, "A man is what he thinks about all day." When I was miserable, I was filling my head of all the negative content, all of the voices, that article that was written by me. I was forcing myself to replay horrible things that I had been exposed to in the job that I was doing. I would constantly replay all of the negative things I've heard about myself for my entire life. That's no way to live. And ultimately, my life, the way that that manifested was in all of the things around me. I had this nasty filter that I overlaid on everything in life. I was negative. I was full of all of this negativity. But whose fault was that? It was mine. I was making myself that dog in the cage. And I switched that. Now I think about, how can I provide the most amount of value to the world? How can I provide for my family the lifestyle that we're after? How can I provide for my kids everything it is that we want out of this life? Because I've only got one chance to do this the best that I possibly can. And I'm not going to waste that, especially knowing that I have control and I don't have to be that dog in the cage. The second quote is by Henry Ford, and this one's overplayed a good bit, but it's, "Whether you think you can or you can't." You're right. Can you change the world or can't you? Whatever your response is to yourself, you're right. Can you start a successful business? Can't you? Can you get a higher paying job or can't you? Either way, you're right. Because if you don't think you can, you're never going to execute, you're never going to have the discipline, you're never going to have the willpower to make it manifest in your life. And the last two quotes are both by Jim Rohn, my mentor that's been dead for a long time, but I still consume his content on a daily basis. And the first one is, "Don't wish things were easier, wish you were better." Now sure, that's pretty abstract, but nonetheless, it drives home the point. Don't wish things were easier. Just become the better person. And the last one is, "Don't wish for less problems, wish for more skills." Don't wish the world was easier and had less problems. Wish that you were better with more skills so that you could help the world solve these problems. So coming back to the real world, coming back to all of the situations that are around us, am I saying that racism is not real? No, I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is, in what bearing does it actually impact your life? Who is saying these things to you? Do they have any control over you? If yes, if they do have control, what can you do in order to not be affected by them on a daily basis? If they don't have any control over you, then who cares? Are they making slave jokes? Ha ha ha. Cool story, bro. Move on. Don't let it bother you. Don't let it take you away or distract you from your mission in life. What do you want to accomplish with your life? And what are the ways that you can make that happen, regardless of what these people do or don't say? Do I think there's systemic racism? I don't know. Maybe. But if there is, it hasn't prevented me from becoming a millionaire by 30. It hasn't prevented me from owning more than 60 rental properties. It hasn't prevented me from marrying the woman of my dreams, having gorgeous children, and being extraordinarily thankful for a father who had no father figure and drastically changed his life from where he came from. One generation it took to put me in what? The top 10%? Who's going to take that away from him? Nobody can take that away from him because he made the decisions. Yes, he had help along the way, but he didn't lose sight. He didn't let negative people distract him. He didn't let people talk him out of marrying my mom. My mom, she didn't allow anyone to talk her out of marrying my dad. She got disowned by her dad. How powerful is that? She didn't care. My dad had no conversation with me as a child about the fact that I might be judged improperly. My dad never let me use any excuses for my poor performance in anything. I'm not going to have that conversation with my kids. I'm going to hold them to a level of standard where they better be the best that they can possibly be. That's it. In whatever small way they can improve the world, that's what I want them to do. I know my dad didn't make this quote up, but one thing that he always told me in sports was, it's a bad day when a craftsman blames his tools. Personal responsibility, personal ownership, that's what it really comes down to. If you don't feel like you have control over your life, what are the variables? What are the things that you can take control over? And take control of those. And what you're going to realize is the more things you have control over, the less other people around you can possibly affect you. But it all starts with you, and it all starts in here. You know, I talk to my brother a lot, and one of the things that we most certainly want to achieve in life is all of those people that helped my dad along the way. We want to be those people for as many people as possible because here's a good quote from another powerful, positive person, Zig Ziglar, also been dead for several years, but he said, help enough other people get what they want, and you could have everything that you want. So I tell you what, if you have watched this, if you are in any way, shape, or form not the person that you want to be, if you are not where you want to be financially, if you are not where you want to be just in overall life, if you feel like you don't have control over something, if you feel like you're being held down because of race, if you feel like you're being held down because of gender, here's my email. Here's my personal email address. I'll do whatever I can to help you. Because these things that we're acting like have control of us as a nation, they don't have any bearing. There's never been a better time to be a minority in America. The tables are turned in our favor. Every corporation out there is trying to be diverse. Start dreaming. Start dreaming and achieving. And I'll be there to help in any way I can. You just let me know how. That's my commitment to you. Because I refuse to let all of the negative things going on in the world trap anyone that's in my circle or in my network. Because we as a country, we as a nation are much bigger and much better than all of these problems that are being projected to us right now. And I'll stand by that. So feel free to contact me if you need anything. And I promise you, I'll do whatever I can to help. Because it just takes one person to break the cycle. And if you feel it in your bones, if you are that one person to break the cycle, I'll commit to you. You let me know what you need. Thanks. Thanks a lot for letting me say that. I love you guys. I love all of you. And I really look forward to doing my part in whatever it is that you need help with.